Chief Investment Strategist Money Morning, Keith Fitz-Gerald, joins me today to discuss the importance of the Federal Reserve. Keith, how did the Federal Reserve System come into existence?
You know, Frank, people don't understand, but this is actually our third central bank in the history of the United States. It was established in 1913, which means the Fed has not been with us since the very beginning. It's actually not an original part of the American economic machine, and it's only 100 years old. Now, the Fed, interestingly enough, was formed during periods of great turmoil. We had just gone through, in 1907, something called Knickerbocker Trust debacle. Knickerbocker Trust was a bank that failed to receive financial support from its peers, and unable to obtain liquidity from any source, Knickerbocker Trust collapsed. Now, this deeply affected the psychology of the public, because not only were Knickerbocker's peers not anxious to bail them out, but Knickerbocker's peers suspended payments to each other. Customers figured out very quickly that they didn't have access to their money. So bank runs and closures became the norm. The New York Stock Exchange fell 50% before J.P. Morgan, the famous financier, actually locked banking executives in his personal library in New York and formulated a liquidity injection that calmed things down. Now, never one to waste a good crisis, our legislators immediately stepped up and said, hey, wait a minute, we need a central bank to restore public confidence and provide the banking system with a source of liquidity that would prevent its wholesale collapse. Well, that's what they got. So it was born under the guise of a politically independent institution that would stabilize the financial institution, protect the public against inflation, maintain credit by injecting stimulus when things were flagging, and withdraw it when things were good. In the terminology of the day, this was called giving elasticity to the dollar. What irony, because today the dollar is about worth 4 cents versus what it was in 1913. Goods and services that cost $1 back then will now set you back $21. I would submit that that's not very good stability.
Keith, most people think that the Federal Reserve is part of the government, but it's really not, is it?
No, it's not. It's supposedly an independent, apolitical organization. But in reality, today's world especially, it is a highly politicized system and entity. I would submit that it's actually part of the government, even though technically it's not.
Is the problem Ben Bernanke and his printing press, or do we really need a Federal Reserve at all?
You know, it's interesting to me. I used to think that the Fed was integral to how we do things. I now believe that we ought to get rid of the Fed, and it's an abomination. I think that success, by its very definition, includes failure. People forget that the discipline of failure is integral to capitalism. So when the Fed creates money out of thin air, it's effectively removing the risk of failure. Without the risk of failure, big banks can place one-way bets and not worry about the losses because they're literally deemed too big to fail.
Thank you, Keith. I hear you. This is Frank Marchand for Money Morning.